Christian.
Jesus died on a cross. I go to church every Sunday. This guy out here. Then I read that Jesus died on a cross for a rotten hooker.
I thought I was a good Christian.
I go to church every Sunday.
I thought I was a good Christian.
I go to church every Sunday. I'm a very religious person.
I thought I was a good Christian.
The very lies the serpent told to Eve in the Garden of Eden. Garden of Eden. Garden of Eden. The gospel of Jesus Christ spreads confusion and promotes lies. The gospel of Jesus Christ spreads confusion and promotes lies. The gospel of Jesus Christ spreads confusion and promotes lies. The gospel of Jesus Christ spreads confusion and promotes lies. The gospel of Jesus Christ.
Go.
Hey everybody, it is Sunday, February 23rd, 2014. I'm your host, Ken, This Non-Religious Life. Up in the Bay Area, we have Jason.
Hello, how are you?
And somewhere along the East Coast, I assume, we have Matt.
Hey.
And we still have an APB out for our friend Bob Price.
Well,
if you see him.
I have an update. I've heard that he's converted, and that's why he's not on the show.
Ah, that would make sense.
And if he wants to refute that, he can come back on the show.
Yes. You can only be on the show once you repent your faith. And I will take Matt's presence as tacit confirmation that he has done such a thing.
I was an atheist the other day.
Yeah. Best post I had seen all day. Seriously, I was having a real rough day, and I saw that, and I was like, yeah, I like this. So, thank you for helping me out while at work.
My pleasure.
So it's been a few weeks. We've all been kind of busy and kind of doing our own thing for a little bit, but a lot of very interesting stuff's happened. So first off, I want to kick it off because yesterday was a very sort of special event that's very relevant to this show, in that this show got started because of a crazy end of the world prophecy. And yesterday was another end of the world sort of prophecy, but not a Christian one, which is really strange. The other religions they're not so gung-ho about the end of the world. They just kind of see it as a thing that happens. But for anyone who doesn't know, listening at home, yesterday, on Saturday, the 22nd of February 2014, was supposedly the Ragnarok, the end of the world for the Vikings.
Hooray!
What are your thoughts? Yeah. As much as I really wanted a giant wolf to come out and eat the sun, because that would be seriously metal as fuck, it didn't happen. Like their end of the world is pretty intense. I mean, a giant wolf consumes the sun, and then all the gods come down to Earth and fight each other, and there's a giant Viking war. And then the Earth splits open, and the hells spill out, and there's fire and craziness and death. And then the remaining gods get to repopulate the planet once they're done. It's pretty cool.
You gave me an idea. Can you remember how we used to do thought scenarios? We should do a sub show on how metal is your end of times prediction.
Well, I mean, basically, for as far as religions go, like nobody's religion is more metal than like the ancient Vikings. They were all about just like giant monsters and frozen ice giants and Vikings and pillaging and just being general badasses. Plus, they grew crazy metal beards.
Additionally, they ended up with a superhero in the modern day, so it all kind of worked out.
True. Plus, if you look at that area of the world, some of the best metal comes from there anyway. So, there's nothing like Scandinavian black metal. It's pretty intense.
That's a fair point.
Last time I was in Iceland, we got to witness an Icelandic Viking metal band. And
That rules.
yeah, we're actually going back again this year, so fingers
That's-
crossed that we see more metal.
Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah. Not to make this about a music
Yeah.
podcast, but Viking metal is pretty rad. Yeah, that didn't happen. Fenrir, the giant wolf, the son of Loki, didn't consume the sun, and Odin and all the other gods didn't fight to the death on Earth. But
Odin is also not consumed by the Fenris wolf.
yeah, oh well. We'll wait for the next one.
What does this do for Marvel sales? I mean,
So, if anyone knows when the next end of the world is coming, please let us know. Email us, and I would love to wait for it. Wait it out. Okay, so other things that happened in the past month since we've recorded. The much waited for Ken Ham and Bill Nye debate. This was something I found myself going to the website 4 or 5 times with the intent to watch the debate, but I had to stop myself every single time. I was like, nope, I'm not going to watch this. I can't do it. Did either of you get to watch it?
yeah, I watched the entire thing.
You watched the entire thing?
Yeah.
I got a group of friends together to watch it, and then we ended up we were at a buddy of mine's house, and for the first half hour, his kids were running around. No, let me take that back. For the first half hour, we were trying to figure out how to plug the right connection into his TV from my laptop after our iPhones wouldn't go onto Apple TV. And then after that, his kids were running around. And then some more friends showed up, and we watched it for like a half hour. And then other friends showed up, and we started smoking hookah and talking about other things. We actually got into a big debate about Islam in the process. So what I did catch of it was exactly what I thought would happen. Ken Ham. So I missed Bill Nye's intro. I caught all of Ken Ham's opening speech. What he basically did was 2 things that I expected him to do. He drew a distinction between observational science and historical science. So for Ham, there's science wherein you just observe the facts around you. So it's very Baconian. Like, it's very Francis Bacon-ish. Accumulate the facts, only observe the facts you can see. And that's observational science. That's the science of things we can see in the world happening now. Versus historical science, by which he means that you project a view onto the past, which colors how you view evidence, how you view historic evidence and archaeological evidence, paleontological evidence. And then in the process, he switched it. So he drew that distinction between observational, what we can see now, versus historical science. And then he switched it to a worldview issue, where he talked about how evolution leads to moral relativism. And he had like a little picture of like a quick sandy foundation that a building had collapsed into. And then he talked about the Bible and creationism giving a moral absolute foundation and this building that was standing. So he switched it to an issue of the worldview, nihilism versus absolute truth issue. All the while sprinkling in various videos of various scientists, guys who like worked on Hubble and some other things, who were like, yes, I am a creationist, but I am afraid to come out because of the establishment. So he kind of also added that political element in that you saw in something like Ben Stein's Expelled, where it was like, yeah, I mean, there are a lot of us out here, but we're afraid because the establishment has all the power, that type of thing.
Yeah. Yeah, I felt like that's what it was going to be, because these 2 concepts are so there's such a dichotomy against them. Like you have, on the one hand, you have legitimate science, and you have Bill Nye talking about, the scientific method and how we have hypotheses that are tested and become theories, which can then predict what we ought to view if the theory works, which seems to, in every creationist I've ever talked to, that seems to, like, they miss that point. They miss how, like, the theory of evolution, you can take it, and it's not like in a chemistry lab where you can be like, oh, if I mix this and mix this, if it works, I should get this. But it gives us more of a paleontological concept that, well, if I dig here, I should be able to find this at this level, and it should look something kind of like this. Hopefully that when that animal died, the conditions were right for fossilization. And they seem to, like, miss that. Whereas Ken Ham was more absolute. And there's a meme that was going around immediately after, and it really kind of confirmed what I thought it was going to be like, where I guess at the end of the debate, they asked them both if there was anything that would change their minds. And Bill Nye was like, yeah, evidence. Evidence, would you show me evidence and let me look at it and see that it's actually valid. And yeah, I'll change my mind. And then Ken Ham was like, nothing. So, like, he stonewalled himself into place and just, like, defended this, indefensible position. Like, arguing that the world is 6,000 years old is just, it's an inarguable point.
It's funny.
It's like arguing for geocentrism.
Yeah. At one point, Nye was really going after the Noah's Ark issue of like the paleontology record being how the fossil strata and all that were caused by it was like what was it, like the larger animals sunk first and then the other animals on top of them. This idea that the reason the fossil record looks like what does is because the larger animals are at the bottom, the smaller animals are at the top, or something like that, some such nonsense. And so that's how someone like Ham would explain the fossil record, that all these creatures sunk down into a pit as the water filled up, and that explains how the strata are made. So what Nye did at one point was, like, practically beg, like, look, you don't find, like, if there was this coexistence of all these ancient creatures, you don't find creatures from this area of the fossil record up in this area, or ones from this area down in this area. And he was like, if you do find that, please show me.
Yeah. It's Bill Nye arguing with someone who is utterly scientifically illiterate, and purposefully so. Like, the strata of fossils, I like the idea of just big creatures sunk down further, because it's like, not all the creatures that lived during that time period were huge, and a lot of the ones who lived before that time period weren't huge either. like,
if I was Bob, I guess I'd probably say something like, I don't know, man, isn't that just special pleading?
It is special pleading. It is special pleading. At
the end of the day,
it is special pleading, like, and your hypothetical Bob is right. It's special pleading for just to dismiss a valid point, a point that is based in logic. You're just trying to make this argument that's just nonsense, and kind of works in your worldview. It's the whole deluge thing is so frustrating, because we've known that the flood didn't occur for over a century. And how we discovered that is when it actually links not to paleontology but Egyptology, because we had scientists, or Egyptologists at the time, and essentially archaeologists who work solely on Egypt, and they started deciphering the hieroglyphs, and they started building a timeline of ancient Egypt. And then it went back further than the flood, and they were like, wait a minute. And there was a lot of backlash at that time. Like, the church was funding a lot of this research, and they got really pissed when, and when I say the church, I mean the Catholic Church, was funding a lot of this project, and they got kind of pissed off and wanted to block everything from being released when they realized that this record of Egyptian kings, uninterrupted, stretched back, and there was no evidence of a flood.
Yep, that's problematic.
It's like, oh shit! Like, wait, what do you mean there was no flood here? And that's the thing. Like, we have cultures that go back thousands and thousands of years. Like, if the world's only 6,000 years old, I mean, Damascus itself is 5,000. Like, and that's the oldest still standing city. Like, you know, the agricultural revolution was 10,000 years ago.
Did you ever see that? I think it was like a picture on Facebook or something. It was like, if the Earth is 4 billion years ago, or if the Earth was formed 4 billion years ago, then how come it's only 2014?
Oh my God! Every year, there I see the montage of like pics from like Twitter, like little screen grabs of people's tweets, like happy 2013 birthday Earth, happy 2014 birthday America, and I'm like, oh my God. I like hope with everything that is deep down inside me that these people are joking, because I'm like, oh no, like,
like a quarter of Americans did say that the sun goes around the Earth, or the sun goes around the Earth. So,
yeah, 25% of Americans believe that the Earth is the center of the. And it's like, don't you learn the solar system in like 3rd grade?
And you're talking about these facts, but how do we know we can trust those facts, which are coming from teachers who are authority figures?
You haven't been to the sun. How do you know it's at the middle? It's like, oh,
yeah. It's like, let's cast doubt for the sake of casting doubt.
Yeah. Oh boy. What was I was gonna say something right before that. I forget. Oh, yeah, we have. There was an Onion article, and it was like, God creates light on 4th day, to the surprise of like, to the surprise of random cavemen. I thought it was hilarious.
It was cute.
Let me see if I can find it.
My input.
Yeah, Sumerians look on in confusion as God creates world.
Can you post that to my timeline?
Yeah, I will. It's
That's
just
great.
you know, I always want to believe that we're past this young Earth creationism thing, and it's like, you know, it's people don't really believe this. You know, like we've come such a long way. But then it rears its ugly head with things like the Creation Museum and Ken Ham and
I told you I had a woman Facebook message me because I made my like get together to watch the debate public side, like these random people from like Alabama and England like saying they were coming to the event, and I was like, this doesn't seem right. So this one woman wrote me a Facebook message. It's like, Matt, I'm so glad we met. You know, nothing happens by chance, and I can't help but notice that when you post about this event, you seem sarcastic. I would encourage you to keep an open mind, something, something, something. So I went back and forth with her a little. I was like, well, I'm being sarcastic because of this reason. And then she wrote back something like, Ken Ham defends the authority of God's word. I mean, very politely, but like Ken Ham defends the authority of God's word. I pray your eyes will be illuminated, that type of thing. So yeah, they're still out there.
It just blows my mind. But oh God, it gives me a headache. It makes me cross-eyed to think about this concept that people believe that the Earth is only 6,000 years old, and it's like, but science, guys, science. Like, come on, like. Literature. How about that? How about literature? How about Genesis isn't... God wasn't sitting down and jotting down like what he did. Genesis isn't God's diary. Oh, dear diary, today I created light. It was pretty good. I separated the light from the dark, and I called it day. That sounds like a pretty good word. Plus, I'm writing this in English so that in 6,000 years, people know that this is the one true language.
King James English, you should
King
have
James English, of course.
said.
Stamp it out, 1611.
Yes,
NJV for me,
authorized.
NJV all the way.
Authorized.
Jason, did you have something to say? It sounded like you were trying to.
I was just saying about I was very let down with the whole debate because normally I kind of wanted to get something, in these debates like this, even if you don't agree with the other side, you kind of walk away with some kind of insight that you can ponder or think about, and consider when you're talking to somebody. But I was very let down by it because there was nothing new added. There was nothing compelling added. I was just very let down with it.
Yeah, it was very much like the lineup, and I love Bill Nye. I grew up watching Bill Nye,
Yeah.
so I have that soft spot for everything he does because he's, we haven't really had a good science educator in the mainstream since he stopped with his show. It simply hasn't existed. Yeah. But I feel like this kind of debate between like, hey, I'm Bill Nye, and I'm going to talk about common sense, like, general knowledge, and, hey, I'm Ken Ham, and I'm just going to spout a bunch of bullshit. I would have been much more interested in seeing, like, Francis Collins versus, Neil deGrasse Tyson debate, or like a Peter Enns versus a Dawkins. I would have been more interested in that than something like this. And I really wanted to watch it, but at the same time, I was like, I don't know if I can watch this sort of train wreck.
Yeah, I mean, I don't want to call it a waste of time. I mean, it's illuminating in as much as it's great when people say exactly what you expect they'll say. Because it's like, okay, I didn't misread that. I am intuitive.
Yeah, and with Ken Ham, it's exactly that. You're like, oh, yeah, right. You are generally just...
What do you
he's a snake oil salesman. God, he really is.
What do you think this has done to his museum and his market? Do you think this has increased people going there? Do you think this has benefited him in any way?
It's publicized who he is. Everyone kind of knows who Bill Nye is. Ken Ham's more of a fringe figure. He's not as well known. Obviously, he didn't have a #1 TV show for years and years and years. He's different, and I feel like people who already agree with him might now know who he is. Who didn't know who he was before. So he might get that kind of boost there. However, a lot of people who had no idea who he was and don't agree with him know who he is now as well. So I don't know how that balances out as far as like attendance to the museum.
I mean, because I know a lot of, people like us would just go, this dude's totally off in left field. We got to go see what his museum is about.
Oh, yeah, no, exactly. And I would love to go to it. I would hate to pay for it.
There was a huge billboard here in Oakland of the Creation Museum for the longest time. They just recently took it down.
Why were they advertising in Oakland?
I don't know.
It's in like Tennessee, isn't it?
Yeah, there's a 7-Eleven, and they have like a huge billboard attached to it, and it was the Creation Museum.
Oh, Jesus.
Me and my buddy John Daniel, this summer when I was in Minnesota, John Daniel came up because he wanted to look at grad schools on my route home. So we stopped by like Chicago and Notre Dame. He checked out Luther Seminary because there's this famous Old Testament scholar, Terence Thretheim, there, who had just retired. So that kind of marked that one off the list. And so as we were going through, we both talked about going to the Creation Museum and like taking a detour. And at the end of it, the day, we were just both like, we can't do this. Like at some point we were like, you know, I think we'd laugh, but I think in the end we'd just get really angry.
Yeah. Yeah, it's one of those things where it's so frustrating to look at because you think we're beyond this sort of, I mean, like, people riding dinosaurs, really. Tell you what, find me a dinosaur, like, fossil with a saddle attached. You know, like, I love the idea because, like, the saddle wasn't even invented until, like, ancient Greece.
Well, in that case, they could do like the Mongolians do and just, you know, grip them with their legs and
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
have sex with them even. Who knows?
Yeah, maybe.
Because that's what Mongolians did to their horses. Am I wrong about that?
I don't know. That might just be a slanderous thing against Mongolians.
Damn
Okay,
it,
maybe
man.
not then. Maybe I'm using Alexander the Great and his horse.
I don't know if he had sex with his horse either.
Okay,
Wait,
someone
wait,
in
wait.
history somewhere had sex with their horse.
Why do you have all this knowledge about sex with horses?
Yeah, why do you know so much about sex with horses?
Hey, don't turn this around and make this about me.
Nero appointed a horse to the Senate. But I don't know about sex with horses.
Because that
That's
was
it.
blackmail. You know, he had to because the relationship went sour. And he
Yeah.
didn't want his wife to know.
I always thought it was just because he was mocking the Senate and making them look like morons and saying, I can do whatever the fuck I want because I'm Caesar and you can't do shit about it.
That's what Fox News wants.
Suck on that. I'm Caesar, bitch.
Matt's looking it up.
Also, I hope he is. That's great. Also, I do not want to be on the back end of that Google search. Safe search on, please.
Yeah. Don't look at Google Images. Don't do it.
Yeah, this whole thing with the debate makes me think about the concept of these sort of debates and like what their purpose really is, though. Because at the end, when they ask them, like, is there anything that would have changed your mind? I mean, as much as Bill Nye would have said, yeah, evidence, there's no way that the amount of evidence needed could have been possibly, presented in that hour. It would be impossible. The pile of evidence itself, like, if you had a camera on it and it was a literal pile, you wouldn't be able to scan through it in an hour, let alone explain it to someone.
Well, what I'm fascinated about is not just what Bill Nye's answer to, but Ken's answer to it, because in any media training, never to directly answer that type of question.
yeah,
he
true
just
that.
Came straight out and
True
said,
that.
"No."
Yeah, but it's interesting to me because these two people weren't going to convince the other one. That outcome wasn't even in the back of my mind. Like, there's no way Bill Nye's going to lay it down and Ken Ham's going to be like, shit, I was totally wrong about this whole thing. Well, I guess we're closing up shop at the Creation Museum. It wasn't going to happen. So the purpose of the debate really is to showcase these ideas for the audience.
Yeah.
And see how they react to it. I always being the internet, I'm like, oh shit, someone's wrong on the internet. Better explain why they're wrong. And I almost never do so with the intention of changing someone's mind, because despite all the times I comment and correct people on, family members that I have who post ridiculously conservative politic things on their Facebooks, and I'm like, no, that's not how government works. No, that's not how this works. They almost never let it sink in and stop posting it, because I see the same post 45 times, like, oh, I pledge allegiance to the flag. It's with the under God in it. And it's like, this was good enough for us when we were kids. Why isn't it good enough for our kids today? It's like, because that's not the original pledge, and the pledge is stupid anyway. So, but you're never going to convince those people, because if they have it in their mindset enough that they're willing to go into a debate about it, they're probably not going to change their minds during the course of a debate. But anyone looking on and seeing this discussion will hopefully have the wheretofore to put everything together and weigh arguments on merit.
Well, I think that the only thing that this debate allowed people to put together is just internet memes for both sides. I don't think it's actually even gotten to the point where we're having bigger discussions after the fact. I haven't seen anything fruitful come from this on either side.
No, and again, I think that boils down to the fact that it was the common sense, like, general knowledge argument versus the wacky fringe hyper conservative argument. Not even a lot of conservative Christians, I would say. Matt, maybe you can correct me on this, but don't necessarily believe in the literal 6,000-year-old Earth, 6-day creation. They maybe a little more towards the, oh yeah, sure, the universe is fucking old and God just sort of pushed everything along to get to the point where we're at. And I get that argument. I understand why people of faith would want to hold on to that. Whereas, Bill Nye was being like, oh, well, here's, 5th grade, history of the universe. Here you go. And maybe that's why not a lot came about it, because the people who already agree with Ken Ham aren't going to agree with anyone else. Like, they already agree with it. And they're so deeply rooted in their faith.
I wouldn't be surprised if two things happened. I think there are going to be people who heard Nye's argument where some sort of seed will get planted there, and that'll become some sort of discontent. I think that could happen. I also think it's likely that, regardless of what Ham said about the ideas of science itself, I think the more kind of worldview issues could potentially get people thinking. So I'm not sure if it's a total calcification of either side. And when I talk about the worldview issues, I'm talking about the issues of epistemological foundations for morality and the message of Jesus, which Ken Ham went from creation to the resurrection, and I don't think it's entirely impossible that someone somewhere is considering some of the religious idea factors in having heard Ken Ham. But I don't think anyone would be necessarily convinced by science unless I see potentially someone really disenchanted with life, maybe adopting Ham's view out of a discontent and a need for internal consistency in a literalist kind of way. I don't think it's a total calcification. I think both sides will get these little marginal victories.
Yeah.
Which usually happens, but they'll be on the fringe. But
part of these memes, wasn't there a video of Pat Robertson on the 700 Clubs saying that Christians needed to embrace um, or actually get away from the young
Get away
Earth.
from the
Yeah.
literal young Earth creationism. Yeah. Pat Robertson, I guess, came out and made a comment against young Earth creationism and as being kind of ridiculous, and we're beyond that.
Yeah.
Which I saw as like, I don't often like Pat Robertson. I would say so much as I generally loathe Pat Robertson. But it's one of the things where, like, even when he's incredibly conservative, and he's saying, "Hey, let's not get crazy here," as definitely a step forward for the conservative right Christians in general.
Yeah, I think Robertson's more interested in politics anyway. Like, I don't
Yeah, no doubt. I think I do think he's more motivated by where he sees people are going to agree with him rather than what he feels is legitimately true. Being that he's more of a media personality than he is a pastor anyway.
Yeah, well, I mean, I don't mean he's going to change his mind to appeal to popularity. I mean, I think just in terms of like where he would focus his conservatism isn't on like a view of creation, but on his politics and what he wants his political goals to be.
What are his political
I
goals?
was just thinking the same thing.
You went to his school.
What are his political goals?
Yeah, you went to his school. You've got a better connection to him than we do.
Gosh, I don't know. I tried to stay away from them and embrace Anabaptism in the process. So I think overall, Robertson is influenced by sort of the myth of the Christian nation in terms of the founders dedicating the land to God at Jamestown and the first landing, to which Robertson traces back his own ancestry. I think he's definitely influenced by the tradition of revivalism in the U.S.
We do have a tradition of revivalism.
We do, up until even I mean, there's stuff that happened still after the Civil War, but first Great Awakening, second Great Awakening, and really up until the Civil War, an overall evangelical consensus before increasing levels of pluralism. The advent of Darwin's theory, up until the Civil War was really a break from the maybe an earlier sort of evangelical consensus, because at that point post-millennial optimism was broken, because all of a sudden the nation split apart and things seemed to suck. Things weren't getting things weren't getting better like people thought. They seemed to get worse.
Yeah.
Which was kind of consecutive to kind of the modernist optimism as well. And I mean, ultimately that all sort of, whether secular or religious positive eschatologies all sort of kind of broke with the First and Second World Wars. So I mean,
yeah,
which is a different subject. But yeah, I think Robertson wants to see that Christian consensus reestablished through individual people's conversions, but then because of the number of believers in the country, he wants, it would just make sense that, Christian people would elect other Christians as the majority, and they would be the ones shaping the nation's laws, which ends up taking on this weird. I mean, there are a couple things that that would end up. I think you would see, stuff like the cultural acceptance of, I don't know. I mean, porn would probably go underground, but I think the lack of kind of a cultural Christianity that has those built-in socialized shame factors I think, and he probably wouldn't call them that, but once those are reestablished, I think.
I would hope he would have the presence of mind not to call them that. Like,
I think that's part of what evangelicals want, who kind of want to, when they talk about taking back the nation for God, like they want to establish not just imposing laws on people who disagree with them, but they want people themselves to voluntarily convert, and then that way the people they elect would enact legislation that would enforce and add those cultural shaming mechanisms that are required for socialization. I mean, this is sociology and anthropology one. I mean,
yeah. By creating taboos and social mores, you're going to encourage certain types of behavior amongst the populace at large. Yeah, I mean, it's sociology 101, and that's what religion's been incredibly good at throughout the years, is creating those social mores and especially taboos around certain things, and Abrahamic religions especially being very good at that.
Yeah, I mean, arguably, I think it was Thomas Luckman argued that religion is socialization, like not institutional religion, but religion. If you could boil it down to its substance, it is the process of socialization, and then it takes different forms. And I'm not sure if I agree with his idea of socialization equaling religion. I think because if everything is religion, then nothing is religion. I stole that from my sacred and secular class, by the way.
That's nice.
But yeah, I think obviously abortion is something. Evangelicals find unjust. I find it unjust. But we could talk about. I mean, we understand like the theological and philosophical issues of like soul and all these other things that go into that, and why I would say that. With the issue of like marriage, obviously they would want the social shaming mechanisms to be there against gay marriage, and I think it was who was it? Zell Miller? Was he the Democrat from Georgia who supported Bush in 2004?
God, I don't remember. 2004 was a long time ago.
He was a conservative Democrat, and he wrote a book about decency or whatever, and he he was very much a cultural conservative in the way, like, when it came to like profanity and cultural media and stuff. Like, I think cultural conservatives want to see the media culture itself changed as well, in terms of what's considered good, proper entertainment. But again, they don't want to necessarily get all that through legislation. They're hoping that enough people convert so it changes the mores of culture.
Yeah.
And having people in all the different cultural centers to influence those centers. So in Robertson's case, his goal is to have people influencing the counseling profession. And although really the counseling school is pretty good, and at one point they were set up to have one of the best programs in Virginia, and then the school fell apart because there was some internal moving around, and then they had to rely on adjuncts forever. The art communication school, the goal is to put people in places of media and entertainment to influence those venues. And then, of course, same thing with law, same thing with government. I feel like people have feel like people in all the other schools may have a lot of ideas about what happens in the divinity school, when really it's all these scholars who are hired really running a pretty decent biblical studies and theology program that's far less practical than anyone on Robertson's board of directors would probably enjoy.
Yeah, actually, you and I had pretty lengthy discussions about that back when you were still working.
Yeah.
Working there. About how you felt sort of like some of the professors there are probably running a better program than anyone who was in charge would probably like.
Yeah.
And you were worried about if people actually caught wind of what was being taught. yeah, it's I don't. I mean, it does take us to sort of this cultural Christian nation concept and what that even means. But we could get into sort of like that American exceptionalism, Christian exceptionalism sort of debate some other time, because that's a whole other topic, and I mean, we've been down that rabbit hole a few times.
I will say for the part of Regent and the part of Robertson and people who think like him, I don't think their motives are like. I think they're cunning. I don't think they're malevolent. In the sense of like, I don't think they're trying to. I don't think it'll. Like, if they had their way, theoretically, I don't think you'd have like these crusades where people are getting tortured, like convert, or like Michael Servetus, like say of the Father and the Son, or whatever the Son is a coexistent with the Father. Say it.
Yeah.
Like nothing like that. It would just be. It would be like, imagine a nation full of the no swearing laws in Virginia Beach.
I hate those no swearing laws, although the signs are hilarious.
They are. I actually had the T-shirt for a while.
For anyone who has never been to Virginia Beach and is listening to this, all three of us used to live in the Hampton Roads area, and if you go to Virginia Beach, there are these signs, especially along like the around the beach itself, with like sort of that cartoon profanity where it's just a bunch of symbols and then like a circle with X through it, and it's a finable offense to be audibly swearing in public, which I've never received a fine for, which is surprising because I have a dirty sailor's mouth. I can't.
Like the Patriot Festival. Like, you can't tell me that there aren't people at the Patriot Festival who aren't swearing.
Yeah.
Give me another Orange Crush, man. F, you know what I mean? Like, just... Yeah. They're swearing there.
I mean, they have to be. I mean, I don't know. The signs are great. The concept of anti-profanity laws are just abhorrent. But the signs are hilarious.
They are.
Yeah.
So
we've gotten a little bit of off topic.
No forced conversions.
Yeah, but I feel like the no forced conversions thing is really because that sort of concept is so out of vogue. It's like almost no one would put up with that.
I mean, there's that and that whole like, oh, don't fight evil with evil. Fight evil with good. Turn the other cheek. Got it. Right there with you.
Except for when it comes to lifestyles they don't approve of.
Yeah.
Turn the other cheek, except when.
Yeah. I feel like forced conversions and that sort of ideal they're so medieval, and the general public wouldn't put up with it. And the interesting fact about those in power, you can only get away with as much as the general populace is willing to put up with.
Yeah.
Which unfortunately is usually a lot.
Well, it depends on the marketing campaign behind it and how long it will stay around.
Sure. It absolutely has to be like, it has to be cloaked in something else sometimes, and
there he is.
Invasion of privacy cloaked as security, or any other horrific actions.
Think of the children.
Think of the children. Think of the children.
Jason Bayless.
The children.
Jason Bayless, Mr. Justice McJustity over there. I don't know why I said that.
I don't know.
That line would have fit like 5 minutes ago, but I just didn't have the opportunity to say it.
Yeah. But I mean, that's sort of the. I feel like if the public was cool with forced conversions, and we randomly got ourselves into a sort of on the road to a theocratic state, I could see forced conversions coming back in. But thankfully,
See,
we have a very
I think,
pluralistic society where that it just wouldn't fly.
I think there's too much of a principle of disestablishmentarianism where I don't think that it would take a lot for the U.S. in particular to get there.
Were you just waiting for a chance to use disestablishmentarianism?
I found it, didn't I?
You did. Kudos. Well, I feel like forced conversions worked in medieval Europe because everyone was either Catholic or crypto-Catholic. You know, like if they weren't Catholic, they were trying really hard to make you think they were Catholic. So when they caught people who weren't Catholic, you just kind of went along with it. You're like, yeah, everyone needs to be Catholic, except for when I go home and pray to Thor at night. But I'm not going to say that out loud because I don't want to be in that guy's shoes. Whereas in our society, and maybe it's because of that rich sort of revivalist and evangelical history that the U.S. has, where even when you look at, 70% of the nation's Christian, that's fractured down into such tiny little pieces that if it ever came to be forced conversion to Christianity, the next question would be, well, which one?
Well, and that's the beauty of the voluntaristic nature of American Christianity too.
I don't know what you're talking about because they're already doing this mass conversion on us. You look at Obamacare, and I'm telling you, they're pushing that. Next thing it's going to be, sorry,
Islam.
Yeah,
Because
it's a slippery slope,
Yeah,
friend.
sorry.
Slippery slope.
Slippery slope.
Yeah. Forced abortions for everyone.
yay! But I don't need one. You're getting it.
Tough. But I'm a man. Tough.
Should have thought about that before. No.
And Jason just revealed something about himself today.
Yeah. Yeah.
Hooray!
Yay.
Um,
And there was great
it's-
rejoicing.
But I think that sort of nature, I think you don't see forced conversions in modern Europe either, for the same reason that after the Reformation, you had this fracturing of sects into all these different, varied, and I mean, say what you will about Christianity, but I mean, the best definition for Christianity is that you accept that Jesus died and was resurrected for your sins, and that's about it. like if you got everyone in a room and you said, okay, guys, what can we agree on? I think that might be the one thing.
Yeah, it's I was studying 1 Corinthians 15, 3-4, where Paul says, "These are the things I was handed down, that Christ died and was buried according to the Scriptures, and was raised on the third day according to the Scriptures." And like at some level, it's like that's it. That's what he got. like maybe within
Which
3 or 4
one's
years.
1 Corinthians 3 what?
1 Corinthians 15, 3-4.
15. I totally mixed that up and I looked up.
Yeah, reverse that.
3:15. And I was like, wait, what? This is about someone being burned.
This doesn't feel right.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, like, arguably, that tradition could go back to, like, soon after Paul's conversion. Maybe, after he spends, like, the 3 years in Arabia or whatever. If you go by the Galatians testimony over the Acts one, which you should.
What, you don't think Axe had an axe to grind? Would you say it had an axe to grind?
Is it okay?
Fucking
Is it okay,
hilarious.
is it okay if I acknowledge why that was funny and just not laugh?
No, I demand that you laugh. No, you're right. And I think that's for the same reason that if you got a bunch of Christians into a room today and asked them what they agreed on, that would be it. I mean, the number of Christian cults in the first century were pretty numerous.
Yeah.
Not as numerous as we have today, but pretty damn numerous.
We've been teaching on the Apostles' Creed at my church for the past few months. So we're going through each of the like the traditional 12, the traditional, like the according to tradition breakup of the Apostles' Creed, the 12 parts given by each of the 12 apostles. Even though we know that that's not how it happened. Second century, the source R in Rome, etc. But I'm always a big fan of the Apostles. I've always been a big fan of the Apostles' Creed because I feel like the cool part about the Apostles' Creed, the original gospel was a story. Jesus fulfilling the story of Israel, and it was the story of the life of Jesus. That's why the Gospels are stories and not just propositional dogmatic statements of belief. They're stories of Jesus himself. And like the idea of the Apostles' Creed as a narrative story versus the Nicene Creed, which kind of takes on a much more propositional character. And honestly, like at some point, like I'm a Trinitarian, but for those who have issue with Trinitarianism, like there's a point where I look at them and go, I get it. Like, fair point. Here's the Apostles' Creed. This probably is a bit more. This one we can probably find a lot more. Like at some point, like the Creed for me kind of sums up probably the nature of what Christianity is more than the other creeds. Like I get the need for like Ephesus and Chalcedon and Nicaea. I get the need to want to like clarify these positions in these areas that probably should have been left a mystery, but because they were Greek, they wanted to know how to put it all together within their Platonic and Aristotelian systems.
That's what they did.
Yes, they did.
They liked.
And I mean, don't get me wrong. Like again, I like the Trinity. I think there are a lot of things about the social Trinity in particular that make sense in terms of relationality and kenosis and self-giving, and how that should be reflected in humans' interactions with each other. But when it comes to like the basic message of Christianity, I'm gonna push the Apostles' Creed before I push Nicaea on people.
Well, I mean, I wouldn't even say that. Well, yeah, no, I guess that's fair. That's fair. I was gonna say I don't know of any. I mean, the Nicene Creed. I've never been to a Protestant church that used the Nicene Creed. Like I grew up in an Anglo-Catholic church, and I used to know the Nicene Creed in Latin. For fuck's sake, like it was very present. Yeah, I could see the Apostolic Creed being more. It has a little more argument to tradition by about a century, but I don't know. Yeah, all right, but that's very bare bones.
Yeah,
it's very like you're not getting into too much nitty gritty there.
Yeah, I'm a minimalist.
Let's call you Hemingway.
I carry a backpack with me when I travel instead of a suitcase.
I actually do that.
I have found when I bring a suitcase, not only do I pay the extra airline fare, I always bring either more crap than I need, or just have this annoying suitcase the whole time that I could have gone without.
Yeah. Or you just fill it with books.
That's a fair point.
And that does happen. Anyway, I think we're about time.
Correct.
Okay. So for all of you listening at home, that was us ranting for an hour about a whole bunch of topics.
We were going to talk about interfaith dialogue, which actually would have had its own nuances. That's something I've been engaging in lately with these narratives and violence against other people's narratives and
demonization. But if you have any thoughts or comments or outbursts, and you want to let us know what you thought, or you think we should have tackled another subject, or you think we segued not in a great way and we should have done it some other way, you don't like the tone of our voice, that's cool. Email us, nonreligious@zombie-popcorn.com. You can like us on Facebook, facebook.com. Just look for Zombie Popcorn.
/Zombie Popcorn.
Or you can leave us a voicemail, which Jason will listen to, and probably sigh if you're yelling. So try not to hurt his feelings. 757-337-2195. And with that, we will see you next time.
Have a great night. Yay! Armageddon.